Around 2 weeks after an unprecedented attack, which saw pagers and walkie-talkies used by Hezbollah members simultaneously explode, more than 30 and injuring thousands over 2 days. Hezbollah blamed Israel for the attack.
A lot of implications right now going forward for, I guess, defining how people think about this. I've heard talk about whether this would be considered a war crime because it's akin to booby trapping, to the targeting is indiscriminate because we've mentioned that civilians have died. And then on the other end, you've got, well, this is the most precise way you could have targeted anybody. It's better than bombing things. It's better than sending in a military. And insofar as booby trapping goes, this isn't really a booby trap. It's like an explosive device or like a targeted mine or something like that.
They were for Hezbollah, we know that. We know as well that they were actually circulated amongst Hezbollah people only a few hours before they went off. Of course, they did intercept it, but they intercepted it seemingly by either making these devices themselves or by intercepting them at some point in the chain. So whether or not they have informants or collaborators inside Hezbollah who knew to go for that company, or if they just knew exactly how to set up this company in a way that Hezbollah would find it and buy things from it, that's all very mysterious. But it does answer a few questions about legality, because the question about booby traps, it does have a paragraph, I think it's Article 7, Section 2, that does say you can't use otherwise harmless-looking objects as booby traps. But they make an exemption in Section 3, which says that you can do it, especially in an area that might have civilians in it, either if it's in close proximity or on a military objective, or you give warning. They didn't give warning, but it seems to be that they had good enough reason to believe that most of these pagers would be close to or on a military objective, i.e. Hezbollah fighters. Now, I don't know if Israel considers every member of Hezbollah a target or if it's just the militants.
October 30th, 2024. The Israeli War Cabinet approves a ground invasion of southern Lebanon, following indiscriminate bombings across Lebanon, including its capital Beirut, far from the south where the State of Israel has been open about considering an essential part of a greater Israel, following propaganda accusing civilians in southern Lebanon of storing missiles in their garages, which was obviously absurd. The same rhetoric, the same actions we saw a year ago as the State of Israel began its current campaign of against the people of Palestine, in Gaza and now in the West Bank too, along with new fronts opening up in Lebanon, and bombings of Yemen, Syria, and Iran. We've been seeing the horrors the Netanyahu regime is capable of for a year. There is no denying what they are doing anymore. Even the most ardent deniers of the obvious horrors happening in the Levant have had to have seen the tens of thousands dead. Men, women, children, entire neighborhoods bombed into glass. Entire family lines wiped out. Even the head negotiators for peace assassinated by a regime that cannot stop, will not stop. The destruction will continue for as long as the West supplies them with the weapons they need to continue the campaign. One without endgame.
The Israeli Prime Minister came here today and said that Israel is surrounded by those who want to destroy it, an enemy. We're here, members of a Muslim Arab committee mandated by 57 Arab and Muslim countries. And I can tell you here, very unequivocally, all of us are willing to, right now, guarantee the security of Israel in the context of Israel ending the occupation and allowing for the emergence of a Palestinian state, independent state, along the efforts that we all agree. He is creating that danger because he simply does not want the two-state solution. And if he does not want the two-state solution, can you ask the Israeli officials, what is their end game? Other than just wars and wars and wars. I'm telling you, all of us in the Arab world here, we want a peace in which Israel lives in peace and security, accepted, normalized with all Arab countries in the context of ending the occupation, withdrawing from Arab territory, allowing for the emergence of an independent, sovereign Palestinian state on June 4, 1967, lines with occupied Jerusalem as capital. That is our narrative. That is, and we will guarantee Israel's security in that context. Can you ask Israelis what's their narrative other than I'm going to continue to go to war, I'm going to kill this and kill that and destroy this and this that? The amount of damage that Israeli government has done, 30 years of efforts to convince people that peace is possible, this Israeli government killed it. The amount of dehumanization, hatred, bitterness will take generations to navigate through. So ultimately the question is, we want peace, and we've laid out a plan for peace. Ask any Israeli official, what is their plan for peace? You'll get nothing, because they're only thinking of the first step. We're going to go destroy Gaza, inflame the West Bank, destroy Lebanon, and after that, they have no plan. We have a plan. We have no partner for peace in Israel. There is a partner for peace in the Arab world, and that's why the international community needs to move.
On the same day this news was announced, Netanyahu made an address in English claiming to address the Iranian people, as he once did for the people of Gaza. This address was not for the people of Iran. It was for the people of the US and the Western world. People who obviously are more likely to speak English. This war, he makes clear, is not over. It will only expand. And yet...
I speak a lot about the leaders of Iran. Yet at this pivotal moment, I want to address you, the people of Iran. I want to do so directly, without filters, without middlemen. Every day, you see a regime that subjugates you make fiery speeches about defending Lebanon, defending Gaza. Yet every day, that regime plunges our region deeper into darkness and deeper into war. Every day, their puppets are eliminated. Ask Muhammad Def. Ask Nasrallah. There is nowhere in the Middle East Israel cannot reach. There's nowhere we will not go to protect our people and protect our country. With every passing moment, the regime is bringing you, the noble Persian people, closer to the abyss.
On October the 19th, when a series of booby-trapped pages exploded in Lebanon, with Israel taking credit, claiming it was targeting Hezbollah, many in both the mainstream media and the online political sphere, from the usual suspects to former leftist YouTuber and now the guy who went with the N-word defender himself, Destiny, to Israel in the middle of a loner box, spent the following couple of days calling the strikes a triumph, praising Israel for their precision, calling the move an act of espionage straight out of James Bond. This, however, is only true in so much as James Bond is also very bad at espionage. I mean, he tells everyone he meets his full name, for starters. In reality, this pager attack did not just strike members of Hezbollah, but also doctors at work in hospitals, a foreseeable event if you know how often pagers are used in medicine, and in some cases, literal children. Her aunt, Fatima, 48, shared with Anadolu the heartbreaking final moments of her niece's life. She recounted that Fatima was studying alone in the kitchen while her brother and parents were outside the house when the explosion occurred. With tears rolling down her cheeks, she said, "Fatima had just returned from her first day of school, brimming with enthusiasm. She was a top student and loved by everyone." Fatima's friend, 9-year-old Ali Abdullah, also remembered the tragic events. Fatima was sitting on the sofa and was studying when the pager rang. She picked it up to give it to her father, who was outside, but it exploded in her hands, he told Anadolu. Even if this tragedy hadn't happened, this event by itself is just a series of war crimes. From booby-trapping communications devices to killing civilians. That's not even to mention that Hezbollah is a political party within Lebanon, a sovereign nation. And if someone were to target an attack on, say, the Likud party in Israel, which has objectively got much more blood in their hands than any group in Lebanon, Israel would not be calling that a precision strike. It would be calling for annihilation. Which, of course, they are already doing, with both their words and their actions, without even that level of provocation. In fact, their stated reason for killing Syed Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, gives the lie to any pretense that they had noble intentions in attacking him, never mind his party or his country. According to NBC, not exactly a pro-Hezbollah organization, Israel took the decision to assassinate Nasrallah after concluding that he would not accept any peace agreement that didn't end the war in Gaza. So it's fair game to kill a sovereign country's political leaders because they are against a forever war? How is that anything but Western leaders would have us believe that the only reason Gaza has been showered with every bomb known to man for almost a year is because they don't want peace. Despite Hamas having time and time again offered peace deals, rejected by Netanyahu, including on October the 8th, where they offered to release every single hostage in return for Israel not invading Gaza. Netanyahu rejected these, Because they would require him to leave Gaza. Meanwhile, the Netanyahu regime has now assassinated the chief negotiator for Hamas, the one he's supposed to be negotiating in good faith with to end the whole situation. And he's assassinated the leader of a party from another country, because he would not accept a peace deal that did not indeed involve peace. That's not how peace deals work. Peace deals lead to peace. That's not even mentioning that the recent indiscriminate bombings in Lebanon's capital Beirut killed many of the leadership of Marxist Palestinian Party, the PFLP, which probably means it won't be long until the same people defending the pager attacks will be arguing it's okay to indiscriminately carpet bomb a densely populated metropolitan area just for the off chance you kill a couple of guys who oppose your current regime of ethnic cleansing. I'm sure they'd be saying the exact same thing if Israel were bombing London, Berlin, or New York, and crushing thousands under rubble and shrapnel to end the lives of less than a handful of people who pose no realistic challenge against a country with nuclear weapons and the backing of the entire Western world. But for those of you who are still not convinced, let me try to convince you that none of these strikes against Lebanon were precision strikes. In fact, they were the opposite. These are war crimes which intentionally targeted civilians. And if you won't believe your own eyes on this, believe the United Nations and the Israeli government. They don't care if you know it, they will tell you they are targeting civilians. So let's start off simple. What is a precision strike?
Though the gunships immediately began solving a part of our unique environmental problems, more was needed. We had to find and pinpoint targets for our fighter bombers with greater accuracy, particularly so at night when enemy activity was greatest. Now, these needs spurred a number of radically new developments, including Loran computerized navigational systems and laser ranging and designating techniques. One of these developments was the OV-10 paved nail forward air control aircraft, equipped with low light level scopes, onboard computers, and lasers to pinpoint the targets.
The concept of a precision strike dates as far back as the Vietnam War, which should already be a red flag given how infamous that war was for its devastation and long-lasting horror inflicted on the civilian population of Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. But the idea of a precision strike is an attack that is so accurate it will eliminate its target with minimal collateral damage. And if you think this sounds kind of vague and like wishful thinking, given how many of these precision strikes are done in civilian areas where people are densely packed in and thus these strikes are anything but precise, the very website I got this definition from has an author's note giving the opinion that civilian casualties are in fact inevitable, and the language around minimizing collateral damage is but a means of justifying the use of military force in civilian environments. May I remind you that intentionally killing civilians is a war crime. Despite this, people as high up in the United States as former Defense Secretary Michael Fallon have claimed that using precision strikes with particular missiles eliminates civilian casualties. This is so obviously untrue that it's baffling that he would ever say it. Or at least it would be if you didn't know how much the myth of casualty minimization and precision technology has played a role in the proliferation of drone warfare, and investment in that particular big terrifying corner of the military-industrial complex. In fact, according to Professor Maya Zefus, faith in precision bombing requires not only an under-examination of the technology itself, but a redefining of the very word precision. So with this in mind, understanding that precision strikes are kind of a myth, or at the very least, their efficacy is way oversold to the public, did the pager attacks fit the definition, murky as it is, the militaries tend to use? Were the journalists and solar streamers right to defend these attacks, to hail them as the most moral strike possible, even disregarding that this was an attack by a sovereign nation on another sovereign nation, and thus a very clear act of war that we should be treating with the same seriousness as we treated Russia's invasion of Ukraine? Well, even the very makeup of this attack immediately negates this possibility. This can't have been a precision strike. The use of booby traps is a war crime precisely because their use is likely to kill civilians. And it's not just me saying this because I've seen the news stories about how many civilians were hit. This was not a mistake on the part of Israel. This is the very nature of these weapons. And this is according to the United Nations. As NPR, again a pro-Hezbollah news station apparently, puts it. Several international treaties and protocols to which Israel is a signatory could render these actions by a state such as Israel illegal under international humanitarian law, scholars say. One particular focus is Article 7 of the amended Protocol 2 of the Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons, which was added to an international law focused on the use of conventional weapons in 1996. Both Israel and Lebanon have agreed to it. It prohibits the use of booby traps, which Lama Fakih, Middle East and North Africa Director of Human Rights Watch, defines as objects that civilians are likely to be attracted to or associated with normal civilian daily use. In a statement, Fakih said the use of an explosive device whose exact location could not be reliably known would be unlawfully indiscriminate, using a means of attack that that could not be directed at a specific military target, and as a result would strike military targets and civilians without distinction. Human Rights Watch has called for an immediate and impartial investigation into the incidents. A group of United Nations human rights experts called the simultaneous explosions terrifying violations of international law. To the extent that international humanitarian law applies, at the time of the attacks there was no way of knowing who possessed each device and who was nearby, the experts said. Simultaneous attacks by thousands of devices would inevitably violate humanitarian law by failing to verify each target and distinguish between protected individuals and those who could potentially be attacked for taking a direct part in hostilities. And Jessica Peake, an international law professor at the University of California, Los Angeles School of Law, told The Intercept that detonating pages in people's pockets without any knowledge of where those are in that moment is a pretty evident indiscriminate attack, and that attackers were, in her view, quite blatant, both violations of both proportionality and indiscriminate attacks. So the use of booby traps is explicitly forbidden by international laws, which Israel is a signatory to, precisely because they are likely to target civilians. This was intentional. And this, by its very nature, was an act of terror also. Now, who knows what devices might contain explosives? And even all that aside, it is not a precision strike. And if you need that further underscoring, doctors and a child died in these attacks. In fact, in the days following these strikes, Israel leveled entire city blocks from southern Lebanon to Beirut. Were these precise? No! No one could argue otherwise. And yet people spent days insisting on these attacks being a work of genius, minimizing civilian casualties, while Israel intentionally bombs civilian areas. And just in case you want to dismiss this as just a series of horrible mistakes, as if the IDF doesn't know the international laws it's breaking when it orders these attacks, as if they haven't made it very clear that they intend to continue their rampage until all their neighbours are flattened, well, then may I introduce to you a concept known as the Dahiya Doctrine.
Now, Dahiya, interestingly, is also the name given to Israel's military policy of disproportionately damaging and indiscriminately bombing civilian areas to prove a point. Yes, it's an actual Israeli strategy, and the name for it is the Dahiya Doctrine, named after that Beirut suburb that Israel attacked just recently, but also that Israel flattened during their 2006 war with Hezbollah. See, the Dahiya Doctrine calls for the Israeli military to intentionally, deliberately, cynically inflict long-lasting and disproportionate damage onto the enemy, no matter how bad the civilian consequences. AKA exactly what we're seeing in Lebanon now and in Gaza for the past year. This strategy was established with the rather delusional belief that disproportionate force will somehow deter terrorists from attacking Israel again, which, as we've seen from Israel's repeated use of the Dahiya Doctrine in their 2008 war with Hamas, their 2012 war with Hamas, their 2014 war with Hamas, is far from the case.
If you are of any doubt that Israel has no intention of using precision strikes, and instead is extremely happy to attack civilian centres, look no further than the Dahiya Doctrine, a military strategy named after Dahiya in Beirut, and dating back to the 2006 war with Lebanon. Once again, Israel is back, attacking southern Lebanon and attacking Beirut, and intentionally harming civilians. In fact, the Dahiya Doctrine is literally a strategy of disproportionate force and mass destruction of civilians and civilian infrastructure, named after an assault in which the Israeli military killed nearly 1,000 people, a third of which were children, with the intention of pressuring hostile governments. The thing is, if you know anything about military history, you'll know we figured out these techniques didn't work almost 100 years ago. From the London Blitz to the firebombing of Dresden, many of the major city bombings of World War II were made with the explicit intention of damaging morale, to pressure civilians to turn on their governments. They did not work. In fact, the Brits in the audience will recall the idea of the Blitz spirit, how communities pulled together under the bombings, at least in the public imaginary, becoming closer and more tightly knit. Because bombing civilians doesn't turn them against their governments. It turns them on the people bombing them. Obviously. Israel's horrific crimes in Gaza since October 2023 have been, according to journalists for The Guardian and The Washington Post, extensions of this doctrine. A mass campaign of bombings and terror on civilian centres. And as we know, a year later, all this achieved was death and destruction, including of Israel's own citizens, and the hostages they used and still use as an excuse to wage their campaign of against the Palestinian people. In case you're wondering if the Dahiya Doctrine is somehow allowed within the scope of international law, Since Israel applied it in both 2006 and 2023 and has never faced any real consequences, the answer to that would, as you might guess, be no, according to the International Committee of the Red Cross. Applying the principle of proportionality is critically important for protecting civilians and critical infrastructure in situations of armed conflict. An attack against a military objective can be lawful only if the principles of proportionality and precautions are respected, meaning that the incidental civilian harm must not be excessive, and the attacker must have taken all feasible precautions to avoid this harm or at least reduce it. In addition, Article 51 of the Fourth Geneva Convention prohibits attacks which may be expected to cause incidental loss of civilian life, injury to civilians, damage to civilian objects, or a combination thereof, which would be excessive in relation to the concrete and direct military advantage anticipated. Still, no matter how it violates international law, as long as it remains unpunished, it will continue its rampage. And as the Israeli military once again destroys huge swaths of civilian infrastructure, indiscriminately kills tens of thousands of civilians, and attacks once again Lebanon, including Beirut, including Dahiya, it would seem that the Dahiya Doctrine is back with a vengeance. And that means an official policy of mass civilian death. While these horrors are being wrought on the people of Lebanon, just as they have been for a year on the people of Gaza, and more recently the West Bank, Israel's PR machine will continue to make excuses to the West. Its patently ridiculous claims that people's houses in southern Lebanon have hidden missile silos, for example, that are only believed by the most gullible people on the planet, and honestly are insultingly false. They think you're stupid. Some of us, I guess, some streamers apparently are, but most people just wouldn't buy a lie as ridiculous as that. Right? Not when the truth is so self-evident and so bloody. Do not fall for it. They think you're stupid. Don't prove them right. Stand with the people of Lebanon. Do not watch idly by as Netanyahu invades yet another country. We need a full arms embargo on Israel now. Wherever you are, your government should not be selling the arms that are committing these atrocities. Let them know you think so. Let the Lebanese live without fear of invasion. Free Palestine, end the apartheid, and hold Netanyahu and his cabinet responsible for these horrors, or this will keep happening. We need this fucker in The Hague yesterday. Do not be silent. Do not be complicit. And thanks for watching. Hey, thank you for watching this video all the way to the end. If you like this video, I mean, it's a depressing topic, but if you liked it, you sick fuck, why not like this video, give it a comment, subscribe, tell your friends, and give me some money so you can give me money so I can make more stuff that's important like this that YouTube doesn't like. Yeah, you can do that on a Coffee or PayPal for one-time donations. That'd be good. Or you can send it to my Patreon or YouTube memberships, where you can get early videos, access to members-only Discord, my Nintendo Switch friend code, and exclusive content, and you'll get your name read out at the end of each video, just like these lovely people. Based Finger, Madeline Aguirre, Ben Murphy, Lex Phoenix, Ender Kozitz, Janelle, Mirror D, Jade Senior, Boa Ia, James W. Muffin, or Tamsin, Bob the Builder, 5445554, Deborah Laboon, Vegas, Zilla Athenium, Vince Whittaker, Million Chain, Sarah, Jason Hague, Frank McManus, Susan Foster, Helena Real, Zero Whiskey, Orestria, Alley Cat Girl, John N, Skelly Jan, Lloyd Lucien, Day, Jason Cribbett, Shield Vaden, Robin Podolsky, Casual Observer, Manta Ray, Courtney Bermack, Sleepy Slag, Philippa Tabrogger, Soma Piglet Brain, Do, Sharty Wolf, Greg Noble, Diana McMillan, Caroline Regalado, Alexandra, Lily, Howard, Laudner, Aeneas, John, and Joey Bobolt. I don't know why my voice changed halfway through that. I just tried to go with it. God fucking knows, jeez. You know, you talk about something like this because you have to talk about and you want to talk about, because fucking hell. And it just turns my brain into, you know, I can only be angry at so long before my brain just turns into goo. So here we go, we're at the goo phase now. Support me so my brain can not be goo anymore, and more importantly, support the people of Lebanon and Palestine and Congo and Sudan, as well as that. But yeah, stop this fucking bullshit. BDS now. BDS. If you hear a long beep, what I said, I went over it with my lawyers, of which I do not have any, and they said, don't air that, because that would be grounds for arrest. Okay, bye-bye.